Just like that. Right on the backslide. What do we got? Oh, it's a big smallmouth too. Big one. Oh, look at that tank. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I recently did a Krej fishing video where I was catching a bunch of bass, largemouth fishing the Krej without forward-facing sonar, and I had a lot of people ask me to do a retrieve video specifically on that. You know, I was out on a day, it was really windy, so I kind of did some fish catches overlaid on top of kind of what I was doing to get those fish to bite. So I figured I'd just do a quick video and talk about the Berkley Krej and the different retrieves that I like to do with it, because it is really a one-of-a-kind bait, very, very unique. It's a bait that was designed around forward-facing sonar, and it is something that if you have forward-facing sonar, it definitely allows you to manipulate this bait to its full extent and take advantage of all of its characteristics. But you don't have to have forward-facing sonar. I'm not using forward-facing sonar. I'm not using any electronics today. My little John boat doesn't have any. I sold my big boat with all my Lowrance graphs. So we're just out here fishing around with it, and I've truly fallen in love with it. So if you're not familiar, this is the Berkley Krej. It's basically a jerkbait style body, but it's got an upturned lip here. And one question I get too, a lot of people will say, do you tie direct to the eye of the bait, or do you use a clip or a loop knot? And I actually reached out to Berkley and said, hey, should I be using a clip or a loop knot to enhance the action of the bait? And they recommended not using one and tying direct to the bait, just from the standpoint that the bait's already got enough action. And if you really let that bait swing free, and it can tangle on itself. It's like it doesn't need to have a loop knot or anything else to it. It's just one of those things where this bait is one that you can overwork, in my opinion. If you really start fishing it like a true jerk bait, you're probably going to hang the hooks on itself, and you're not going to be able to take full advantage of the bait. So let me show you how I throw it. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how I fish it without forward-facing sonar. And that is much more like a jerk bait. And a couple characteristics. You got to realize, if I let this bait fall on slack line, it's going to actually backslide at a 45. And when it does that, it shimmies really good. So that's one of the key characteristics to drawing bites. So the first thing I do is I throw it out, and I actually give it some slack line, and I'm letting it fall. I'm fishing about 10 foot of water right here. I'm just letting it fall until I get to about where I think is close to the bottom. And then one of the things I like doing is just kind of giving it short snaps, almost like I'm walking the dog with a topwater bait, some sort of walking bait. And I like to do that a little bit. I'll do that, probably retrieve it 10 feet or so, stop it, retrieve it 10 feet or so, just like I'm walking the dog. And then I like to kill it, and I gotta give it some slack line so it backslides. And I want it to go down back towards the bottom. And then I just start walking the dog again. Kill it, walk the dog, kill it. And what that bait is doing is it basically is walking the dog under the water, but it's also rising. Remember, with that lip, it wants to rise to the surface. And that's one of the key characteristics about the bait, is it's rising to the surface, which is something that fish like to do, is push bait fish to the surface. So I throw it out there, let it fall down close to the bottom, or to the bottom, and then I just give it like a nice little simple walk. If I really start snapping it hard like a jerk bait, you'll find that the bait will foul quite a bit on itself, because it really does have a lot of very erratic motion. So I'm just popping it. I'll do it for 3, 4, 5 real turns, and then I stop it, let it backslide. So I'm almost working the bait probably halfway up to the surface, letting it go back to the bottom, working it halfway to the surface, letting it go to the bottom. So that's one way. Another way, and this is how I like to fish a jerkbait in cold water too. So I'll let it go down closer to the bottom, and then I'm just giving it nice slow sweeps. I'm sweeping the bait probably 8 or 10 feet at a time, and you'll feel the bait wobble. And remember, if you go too fast, the bait will actually blow out. But you want to feel that vibration. When I do that, I feel the vibration of it. And this is a really good way to draw strikes in really cold water. So I call it just a sweep, where I'm just letting it go and I'm sweeping it. And then when I'm pulling, I'm not reeling in my slack. I'm reeling it a little bit, but I'm letting it backslide. And remember, every time it backslides, it's pulling line at it too. And this is one of the key characteristics. So this is just kind of how I sweep it. Really good way to generate bites in that cold water. So that's really another way that I really like to fish it. Now, another way, or the third way, I guess I'd say I like to fish it without forward facing. And all these work with forward facing, but because I don't know that there's a fish behind it, I can't really manipulate the bait to try to draw that fish to strike it. So I'm fishing it in a manner where I think there may be a fish behind it, but I don't really know. And this one's actually to fish it with my rod tip up, where I let it sink to the bottom, and then I'm just kind of popping it. I'm just kind of popping it high up in the water column. I'll pause it, pop, you know, and I'm just doing that with the idea that, again, there's a fish behind it, but I don't know where the fish is. I'm just trying to draw those strikes. Just a simple way to fish it, but I like keeping the rod tip up because it helps keep my bait up. So if I'm fishing a shallow flat and maybe I got some grass, just rod tip up, just popping it. So that's getting the bait to kind of walk back and forth, and then I kill it, lets it backslide a little bit. The other thing to keep in mind too is if I want to control that bait and not let it fall quite as fast, don't give it complete slack. If you give it complete slack, it'll backslide at that 45. If I give it a controlled slack, which means I'm just pulling up on my bait, I got a nice bow, what'll happen is that bait will fall in place, but it'll just rock side to side. It's got a really nice rocking motion when it falls. So you can control that. It'll slow the fall, you get a belly rock, and it'll kind of just fall in place. If you want it to backslide and shimmy, you got to give it complete slack line. So if I'm fishing this bait now with forward facing sonar, it's a little bit different in that I'm really trying to see if I can interact with fish. So if I see a piece of cover, I'm letting the bait fall down to the cover, and then I'll throw past the cover, and then I'm just gonna sweep it or reel it so that it rises up over the cover. And what I'm really waiting to see if I can do is draw a fish's attention. So I'll pull the fish away from the cover. Now at that point, generally what I'm gonna do is keep popping it to get that fish to keep following it. And if they keep following it, what you'll notice if you keep doing that is your bait becomes a surface bait. And that's when a lot of your strikes are gonna happen. They're actually gonna, you know, if I got a boulder out there, I'll cast past the boulder, let it go down so it basically hits the bottom, and I'm gonna, you know, reel it so I can get that bait 2 or 3 feet above the boulder. And if that fish pulls from that boulder, I'm gonna keep pulling them higher. So I'm just gonna keep popping my bait until it hits the surface, just like it did. And generally, as soon as it hits the surface, that's when that fish will engage it. If the fish does not engage it, so I bring it, throw it past the boulder, bring it up, so it comes up to the boulder, the fish comes up and swims back, that's when I give it more line. I free spool it and give it more line. I let that bait fall back, and ideally, if I can get it to fall back past the boulder, the far side of the boulder, and then I'll start popping it again to see if I can engage that fish. And a lot of times you can get that fish to come after it 3 or 4 times on the same cast before they actually bite it. Something you can do with boulders, if there's a stump, if there's a nice little grass pile. It's a really cool thing about this bait. The fact that it continues to pull to the surface is something that a lot of fish, especially spotted bass, have a hard time turning down. If they see that bait actually get up to the surface, that's when they're actually going to go up and crush that bait, because they know they've got the bait fish pinned. So that's one way I like to do it. Now, if I've got a fish that I see that's suspended, so the first one, if I've got cover out there and I don't really see the fish, but I got fish that are suspended, I like to throw past the fish and just work the bait nice and slow, almost like a jerk bait, where I've got it above the fish a couple feet. Now, if I can get them to engage it, I'll keep playing with them to engage it. If I cannot get them to engage, I'll go past them and then I'll do the slack thing. It's just like fishing that cover. I'll give it slack and I'll let it backslide down back to where the fish is at. And when that happens, I try to backslide it down to the level that the fish is at. So sometimes I feel like they didn't see it that first go around, but when I backslide it back down, I'm gonna get it to the level that they're at and then work it right above with their head. And generally speaking, if it's a bass, that's a really good way to engage them. For whatever reason, that first go around, they didn't engage it. The second go around, they actually will engage it. But that's one of the keys to this bait. You have to recognize that you can stop it, give it complete slack, and it's gonna backslide at a 45-degree angle, which means it's gonna go back to the fish. Any other bait, once you're past them and that fish disengages, you're done. But with this bait, you can actually, you know, the faster you can disengage your reel and let it backslide to them, the faster and the better chance you have at re-engaging them into striking. So those are the ways that I really like to fish it. This is a bait, I'm telling you, in my mind, in 2025, we're going to see tournament wins on the Berkley Krej. We're going to see a lot of people throwing it. You know, there are some new colors coming out, guys. So if you want to get them before they're sold out, you might want to check those out. I'll put the link to Tackle Warehouse so you can check it out. But this is a bait in the second half of this year. I've had more interest from professional level guys calling me about it than any other time of the year, which means they're using it, and I know they're having success with it because they're telling me they are, which means next year, the start of this next season, Berkley Krej is going to be on a lot of guys' rods. So the key here is it's a bait you got to figure out how to use. It's not a simple bait to figure out, but if you can figure it out, man, it's deadly. It is just a deadly one. So I think we're going to see a lot of guys fishing with it to start next year and throughout next year. I just expect to see a lot of bass get caught in major level tournaments. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully it helps you. I get so many questions about the Berkley Krej, and hopefully it helps you gain a little confidence, go out, play around with it, regardless of whether you have forward-facing sonar or not. And if you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done so already, stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.